Okay, everybody, so let's talk about the Age of Exploration because, again, I call it this because you cannot discover a place where people already live. That's why I do not call it the Age of Discovery, just saying. So, how did this all happen? And we've talked a lot about the development of the European nations recently, and now that they're economically strong and they're stable, they are going to be able to expand. And the one thing that really helps them is that they can build better ships. Here on the right, you see the Portuguese caravel, which was a huge, huge advantage over other European nations because this was the best type of ship. Now, I already told you like the ridiculousness of the Zheng He ship, but this ship was pretty awesome in itself. It was, very seaworthy. It could handle storms. Eventually, this would be the base model, and then England and Spain would build even bigger ships, but that was the model. And again, they get a lot of this knowledge from the Muslims and the Muslim Tao, and they're able to expand upon it. What also helps the Europeans is they have great leadership and leaders that are going to be dedicated to exploration and expansion. Isabella, Elizabeth, even James, King Henry of the Navigator. We're going to talk about him. The French kings as well. This is going to be crucial. Um, what's even better is the idea of mapping and mapping sea currents, mapping wind currents, which is going to be huge, as well as the development of latitude. They already had longitude north and south of the equator. Then they decide to use Greenwich, England as the prime meridian because, England is spectacular. And that allows you to go east and west so you can create maps on a uh, grid scale, which really allows you to go somewhere and then easily actually get back. And then you have better compasses and lodestones and all of the types of things that they got, again, from the Muslims that allow you to track where you are when you can't see land anymore. And the first nation that really broke out in all of this was Portugal. Portugal would be led by King Henry the Navigator, who just loved sailing and really wanted to expand it. He built shipyards, he opened schools. On the right, you actually see that is the port of Lisbon, which is still a major port in Europe today. And they really will expand out. They'll go to the Azores and the Madeiras Islands, and they'll take over those. Eventually, they'll go to the Canary Islands, where they'll conquer a group of natives because that's what Europeans do. And their big prize will be, of course, the creation of the colony of Brazil, which will be very, very important to European economics. Once again, guys with hats. Guys with hats. Now, of course, everybody was obsessed with India. They had heard about the trade in India, and products from India had been brought by the Muslims for years, and that had been very, very valuable. And the whole idea was that if they could get those types of products and get there, they could cut out the Muslims, and there you go. And so the guy that's going to be crucial here is Vasco da Gama. Just a couple years after Columbus, who we'll be talking about in a moment, he will lead probably the second most important journey of the Age of Discovery and the Age of Exploration. On the right, you see the map of his journey from Portugal to India and following and understanding the wind currents of the monsoons. He would be successful. Now, his goal was, as he said, Christians and spices. He actually will help to set up, if you look up here, Goa, which will be a Portuguese city until the 1900s. It will be absolutely incredible. He also threatens to basically blow anybody up that won't trade with him, which we'll kind of talk about. The impact is just absolutely huge. There is a giant volume of trade. Portugal and Spain and other nations will get involved, and this kind of marks the end to Muslim dominance in the region. Muslims will still control the land empires, but their seafaring selves really will not be any match for the Europeans. So we have a changing of the guard here. Sadly, he was lost at sea in the early 1500s on a journey back. But the most important journey of this entire time period is Christopher Columbus. And we're going to talk about a lot of different things here, but you cannot underestimate this. Now, it all goes back to Isabella. We talked about this a little bit in the Spain video. In 1492, her and her husband Ferdinand will finish the Reconquista, and then that will allow them to take a risk. And in the end, it wasn't a big risk. Some men, 3 ships, it's not going to bankrupt it, but the risk would be worth the reward. Columbus, of course, will journey across the Atlantic and land on modern-day Hispaniola, which is Haiti and the Dominican Republic, although some people point to perhaps landing on an island in the Caribbean. And he did it. Now, we have to talk about the impact of this man. Now, let me look at it, the voyages here. This was his first voyage, and then you have 4 voyages in total. Christopher Columbus's journey changed the entire history of the world. Look, could other people done it after him? Sure, but he did it. You need to understand that he didn't prove that the world was round because he didn't sail around the world. And the fact of the matter is almost no one thought the world was flat. That was something you were taught in elementary school. Sorry, didn't happen. Did they believe in sea monsters? Yes, but a flat earth? No. The fact of the matter is the second he stepped on that island, the world would change. You would never have such a drastic change in a region as you would in Central, South, and North America because of European involvement. We will talk about that. Most of it is bad for the people here, but for the Europeans, this is going to give them an economic base because of the massive money they make from trade and exports from this region, to put them in a position to embrace industrialism and allow them to conquer basically the known world. And it all goes back to Columbus. Was Columbus a nice guy? No. From all accounts, he was an absolute jerk. But you know what? Not all nice guys change history. This was the most important seafaring voyage ever, and you need to get that. Now, there were some other voyages of Portugal and Spain that were very important. You have Bartolomeo Diaz, which also, he was the guy that actually discovered that you could go around Africa, which set up Da Gama. Vasco Balboa discovered the Pacific Ocean, and it was so nice he called the Pacific meaning peace. And of course, the most significant one for Spain, Ferdinand Magellan, which was a voyage from 1519 to 1522, as he became the first man to circumnavigate the globe. You see all the areas in which he stopped. Okay, this officially showing how large the actual world was. Now, he himself died over here in the Philippines, unfortunately, and he set off with 5 ships and only 5 ships and a few hundred men. Only 1 ship and 17 survived, but I believe I mentioned it in class, but just to specify it again, the amount of money they made, because that 1 ship was completely packed, that they were able to re-outfit all the ships. They were able to repair the current ship. They paid all the men extra money for what they did. They gave actual long-term, like almost pension benefits to the families of the men who died, including Magellan, who of course died. And after that, they still made a 200% profit after all of those expenses. What Magellan's journey was so crucial is they showed and made them understand the long-term value of this trade, and the Europeans will be insatiable after that. Now, you also have, as my volume thing seems to say, oh, there we go, the French. Now, the French, they're going to take a little bit of a different approach because the Spanish are going to occupy, which we'll talk about. The British are going to occupy, which we talk about. The Spanish, however, are not going to, or the Spanish are going to do that. The French, however, are going to be a little bit different. They're going to look to explore, and they'll set up some like small kind of trading port type things, And what they want to do is actually look for trading opportunities. And so some of the most famous are Jacques Cartier, which he discovers, if you will, the St. Lawrence River and eventually the city of Montreal. Samuel de Champlain basically explores much of Canada and founds the city of Quebec. Then you have Louis Jollet and Jacques Marquette, who will really examine the Mississippi Basin, traveling up and down the Mississippi, and eventually a guy after them, LaSalle, comes down and helps to create um, Louisiana and eventually the city of New Orleans. And they are going to do a lot of trade with the natives. They have quite a good relationship with most of the natives, interestingly enough. And France is going to really improve on this economically. The English will really be led by a lot of guys. I mean, first you have Sir Francis Drake, who recorded the great song and wants you to YOLO, or that's just regular Drake from Degrassi. Really, there's Sir Francis Drake, who is going to be crucial in discovering the east and west coast of the United States. Also becomes the second man to circumnavigate the globe, is actually knighted because he was so great, and of course he got really good at sailing because he was a pirate. He would also then be succeeded by Sir Walter Raleigh on there on the right, who was also a pirate, who would explore much of the East Coast as well. Unfortunately, he made Elizabeth angry and he was executed. You also had Henry Hudson, who discovered and examined Canada and the Hudson River, although he died because he was there was a mutiny amongst his men, and he was actually sent out to on a lifeboat, if you will, in the middle of nowhere, and we assume died. But where these guys are going to be very different is they are going to look to eventually settle, and we'll talk about the impact of it yet. But for a fun fact, I can't help but notice that these two guys look remarkably like the six-fingered man from The Princess Bride. If you have not seen The Princess Bride, still see it, but I think it's very interesting. The biggest achiever that no one gives credit to actually ever in English history, even though it's a little bit after this time period, is Captain James Cook. This guy circumnavigated the globe. He lived from 1728 to 1770 were his actually main voyages, so he did quite a lot of traveling. But basically, everything we know about the Pacific was because of this man. He looks at Hawaii, he discovers Australia and New Caledonia, Vanuatu. He actually sees the Arctic. Tahiti, Tonga, New Zealand. This guy did everything. He also wrote about cultures and different types of animals and plant life. He is probably the most complete explorer ever. Now, whereas Columbus is undoubtedly the most important here, you can't deny that. I actually think James Cook is probably the most experienced out of all of them, which was pretty incredible, and really the guy that achieved the most. Sadly, he got himself involved in a argument, if you will, in Hawaii. Some people try to play off that they thought he was a god and bad things happened. Totally not true. What actually happened to him is he clearly tried to kind of buy off the Hawaiians with some things and got himself in the middle of some arguments, and then eventually he got himself killed. But a guy that doesn't get enough credit, and believe it or not, John Green did a really interesting video on him, and I think you should check it out. Hey, the Russians, they get involved. You've got Vitus Bering exploring all up in the Arctic Circle and in Kamchatka, which is, famous from Risk and the Bering Islands and the Aleutians. And this is why actually Russia will take control of Alaska. They will also, because of his explorations, they will continue to spread out. They will get themselves to the Caspian Sea, the Black Sea. They will conquer Siberia, which is going to be really important, which is going to give them incredible amounts of access to things like furs and timber and minerals. And later on, they'll get access to oil, coal, and natural gas. And so Russia is now also getting involved in this, and they'll have great things to trade as well. Unfortunately, with expansive comes conflict. Everybody wants the cool stuff. Portugal, they get everywhere because they have the best sailors and ships, but they're just too small and they lose stuff to Spain, and they actually get in an argument with Spain in which the Pope decides that Spain basically gets to keep everything in the New World, and Brazil just got Portugal, so that's kind of crappy for them. And then eventually they actually lose every single one of their colonies and areas they explore except for the city of Goa in India. The English and the Dutch, they are the ones that push out the Portuguese, but they themselves will go to war. The British will settle in Canada and North America, but the Dutch are in New York, which they bought for, of course, we hear the famous story, for $24. It really didn't matter because no matter where they went, the English got them. They go to New York, the English get them out. They go to Cape Town in South Africa, the English get them out. They go to Colombia and Jakarta, which is in Indonesia. They'll actually hold on to that for a little while. Then you get the development of Dutch and British shipping companies, the most famous being the United East India Company, which is actually, here's their symbol here, and you can see that these guys were absolutely everywhere. And these guys come to run the trade, and actually some of them become so powerful. For instance, the East India Company of the United Kingdom will actually run India for Britain when they conquer it. It's actually quite remarkable. They establish their own colonies, they pay taxes, and we get to the point where shipping is now global. Along with them, we have Spain will advance into the Philippines, and they will be able to massively convert the area to Christianity. The Philippines is actually the largest Catholic nation in Asia, and they'll eventually help to spread that to Christianity to Korea. Manila becomes the new hot city, and they actually have their own fleet. They're known as the Manila Galleons, and they actually travel the entire world, New and Old World. In Indonesia, the Dutch knock that off by Jan Pieterszoon Cohen, and they will start to expand power over natives. And you see Europe going global, and really just about a 200-year period. They go from just the continent to all over the place. And this presentation was just to give you a sense of what they were doing, and what we'll get into in the next couple presentations is really looking at the impact of that for Europe. All right, get your comments and questions, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.